and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah. I am happy to be back with you, bringing you another author interview. As we get started, I do want to remind you, as I do at the beginning of every episode, to please like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you're either listening to or watching this episode on. Really does help. The algorithm gets the podcast out to more readers such as yourselves. Greatly appreciated. Another way that you can support the podcast and the network as a whole is by going to gsmcpodcast.net. There you can leave a tip or a donation, whatever you would like to call it. I know I always say a tip or a donation as those, anyway, you know the drill. You can leave a donation. It helps not only this podcast, but the network as a whole. It really does help this podcast exist. You help this podcast exist just by doing all of the things that you do naturally, watching it, listening to it, sharing it with a friend, following on social media, leaving a positive review. All of those things that you do, have done, continue to do are so helpful and so greatly appreciated. So once again, that is gsmcpodcast.net if you would like to help the podcast in a financial or monetary way. How is your week going? It is Wednesday. We're in the middle of the week, hump day. It is raining like crazy here. I think I said this at the beginning of the last episode. It was raining then too, and it has just continued to rain. We had one sunny day on the weekend, and that was amazing. It was beautiful to see the sun and not have the gray and the gloom and the rain. And I'm grateful for the rain, but it's a little depressing. And the dog's not impressed, especially Frost. He does not want to go outside. He woke me up the other morning, about 3 a.m, because he wanted to go outside. So we got up and we walked to the door, and I opened the door, and he just backed up. He started backing away from the front door like, absolutely not. This is not going to happen. No, thank you. But it also means that we're still not going on regular walks, and he's very restless. They're both very restless. But yesterday was Chalupa's gotcha day. 12 years ago yesterday, we got him. I was not feeling well yesterday. Not that we were going to have a party or anything to celebrate, but I did still manage to bake him his usual gotcha day cake. Yes, I bake my dog's birthday and gotcha day cakes. No, they're not regular cakes. I mean, you could eat it. You might not enjoy it because it's not sweet. It's just pumpkin and applesauce and, just basic ingredients. So technically you could eat it, but the dogs love it. And so they got their usual gotcha day cake. Anyway, we are... as much as you see them in the videos as they wander through and about in interviews, depending on what's going on, we are not here to talk about my dogs. I could do so all day if you wanted me to, but that would not be fair to Wendy, who is joining me for this episode to talk about her book. I am speaking, as I said, to Wendy Johnson. We are talking about her book, Kinship Medicine. Let me go ahead and give you the description of this book. Give me 1 second. Our modern way of living is incompatible with our survival. Most of us intuitively know this truth, but almost everything in our society encourages us to ignore it. Dr. Wendy Johnson confronts this undeniable fact and breaks down how we think and act every day in ways that undermine our individual and collective well-being. The antidotes to many of the casual factors of poor health, loneliness, industrial diets, systemic inequality, fear of death, profit-based healthcare, are relational with each other and with the living earth. Through evidence from public health, sociology, anthropology, human ecology, and her experience as a family physician, Dr. Wendy Johnson will show you how. We must incorporate an ecosystem perspective into modern medicine. What you ingest and where you live can reinforce or upset your body's delicate balance. Eliminating one organism in an ecosystem can affect all the others. Histories of trauma can be passed down for generations. Rekindling our relationship to non-human life is essential to our well-being. Being closer to death can release some of its power over us. Actions of communities will be stronger and more lasting than any individual efforts. You will leave with a clear vision of what a new society might look like, methods to accomplish this transformation, and concrete examples of where it is being done successfully. So, again, that is the description of Kinship Medicine. The full title is Kinship Medicine Cultivating Interdependence to Heal the Earth and Ourselves, as I'm sure you saw and read there in the book cover next to me. So, this is a book that, as you heard, is really focusing on the health in an ecosystem, health in a relational way. How do we look at health not only just from a medical perspective, but also from an ecosystem perspective? How do we look at ourselves as part of a greater whole? And what does that do in terms of how we think about health, medicine, cure, the way we treat illnesses, the way we think about illnesses? There's been lots of research and conversation around this. Wendy herself has been a physician for many years and has worked in a variety of settings that have helped her to think more deeply about this subject and examine it in different ways. And as she did that, she wanted to share her observations, her knowledge, her experiences, and the things that she think might help in terms of creating a new way of thinking about health. Of course, lots of different cultures and societies and countries think about medicine and healthcare in lots of different ways. So there are numerous perspectives on this, but what can we learn and how can we apply it to our own lives? That is what Wendy is trying to examine with this book. So let's go ahead and turn to the conversation with Wendy. Again, the book is Kinship Medicine. The author is Wendy Johnson. Hi, Wendy. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah. It's really great to be here.
Thank you for being here. I am excited to have you on the podcast. We're going to talk about your book, and I want to make sure I get the title right. It's Kinship Medicine, Cultivating Interdependence to Heal the Earth and Ourselves.
That's correct.
Yes. So before we talk about the book, though, if you wouldn't mind taking just a few moments to introduce yourself, share a little bit about yourself and your life.
Sure. I'm a family and addiction medicine doctor. I've been practicing for about almost 30 years. I finished residency almost 30 years ago. I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, a little bit north of Santa Fe, and I've lived here for about 12 years. But originally I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I joke and say I'm from Lake Erie because I was born in Buffalo and grew up a little bit in Cleveland, but mostly went to high school and elementary school in the Toledo area.
Mm-hmm.
So all along Lake Erie, and that part of the world is still really important and special to me.
Yeah. So we were talking about weather before we started recording, and you know all about lake effect, snow and cold.
Right. Right. We're getting a little, I mean, it's a big snowstorm here right now, all across the Southwest and Northeast. And we don't have much snow here, but I miss I actually miss the lake. I miss the lake freezing. It's a really fun thing to see the lake freezing. So
yeah. Yes. But you can always go back to visit the frozen lake and not have to live with it.
Yes, that's true. And I do go back often. So that's good.
Okay, so the book Kinship Medicine, can you give an overview of the book?
Sure. In my experience practicing medicine over the last 30 years, family medicine mostly, I was attracted to family medicine because the idea is that you treat whole families. It's a little more generalist and holistic than other specialties. But even in family medicine, I find that our Western medical system really doesn't often have space for families or communities or environment. We're really just looking at the individual, and that individual biological and genetic factors that cause disease, they only make up about 20% of what determines our health and well-being. And that other 80% is pretty much ignored by our Western medical system. So over the years, I have attempted to do things in the clinics that I've worked. I've been medical director in community clinics and director of health department for the city of Cleveland in my career. And in those positions, I've tried to start initiatives that can kind of expand how we think about healthcare, but it's almost impossible to do in our for-profit medical system because those things, addressing that other 80%, which is your environment, your educational background, your socioeconomics, your community where you live, your relationships with your family, all those other things make up an ecosystem that is really critical to our health and is ignored by the healthcare system that we currently have. So over time, the book kind of percolated in me. It's like, what are those things? What do they look like? How can I talk to people about how important they are? And through almost the process of writing the book, I came to understand that our whole frame really of how we view health and wellness is wrong. The medical system views your body as a machine to be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
And we ourselves, if you look at the $3 trillion wellness industry, think of, we've bought that whole message. We think, oh, we just need the right supplements, or we need to do the right exercise, or we need to, have the right creams on our faces, or whatever it is. There's so many things out there that the wellness industry is selling you, diets, programs, all kinds of things. And they're all focused on the individual really narrowly. And again, they're all playing in that 20%, and nobody's really paying attention to that other 80%. So what if we had a frame, instead of looking at your body as a machine, what if we looked at it more like even a garden or an ecosystem? Because truly your body is an ecosystem.
Yeah.
You and me sitting here have about 30 trillion cells in your body that have your DNA signature, but you have 39 trillion cells that are other organisms. So even your body itself is mostly not you. Even your body itself is a community of organisms, and you would die if you were truly an individual, if you didn't have that community functioning well. And when people don't have that community functioning well, it's called dysbiosis. Now we have a name for it. It causes all kinds of problems to your health. Okay. So I thought we really need to have a different way to look at health, a different way to look at wellness, a different whole frame. And how would that affect the way we look at cure, the way we look at treatment, the way we look at healing and wellness, and even medical research?
Okay, so there you heard Wendy talking about the body as an ecosystem, as part of an ecosystem, not only its own ecosystem, but as part of an ecosystem. And I think for me, I've definitely thought of it as part of an ecosystem, but maybe not focused as much on my body itself as an ecosystem, and how, I can't remember how many cells she said we had, an astronomical number of cells all working together as that ecosystem. And so you heard her talking about how a different way to look at not only health and wellness, but also cures and healing. So we're going to go ahead and take our first break of this episode. When we come back, we will be talking about what prompted Wendy, through her experiences and her knowledge and her practice in medicine, to sit down and write out all of these thoughts and put them into the book so that we could read it and hear what she has to say, and how it can help us to think differently about our health. You are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to work, cause my boss is a jerk, and I'm not even that paid. I need a change in my life, cause I don't feel alive, and there's nothing that makes me happy. Hold my beer for a minute, I'm about to quit my job, cash in for a ticket. I'm going on a trip and I don't plan to visit. I'm gonna stay there till I feel like I'm winning, and this is just the beginning. I need a big change, help me feel like living. I need a big swing, home runs I'm hitting, and I'll never look back, moving on till I get it all. And we all got dreams, we all want things, but What you gonna do for it? How you gonna move for it? What you gonna be? And do you believe you can do anything?
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with Wendy Johnson. As we get into this second segment, I do want to remind you one final time that if you want to help the podcast in a financial way by leaving a donation of some sort, you can do so by going to gsmcpodcast.net. This helps, as I've said before, the network as a whole, not just this podcast, but your help is always greatly appreciated. The podcast does not exist without you, and thank you so much for all of the support that you have given, whatever form that support has taken, past, present, and future. Before the break, Wendy was talking about her experience and how all of her experiences have combined and come together to help her think differently about health, healthcare, wellness, cures, the body as not only part of an ecosystem, but an ecosystem unto itself. Let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Wendy. So you've been thinking about this obviously for a long time and kind of making connections and thinking about other connections. What was the kind of the final push that said, you know what, I need to sit down and write this out and maybe turn it into a book?
People ask that a lot. I'm not sure there was a final push. I've always been a writer of things like op-eds and academic articles. I majored in undergrad in English and political science. I'm a huge reader, and my house is filled with many books, and many more than I've read. I saw a funny meme the other day. If I read one book, I reward myself with buying 4 more. So that's kind of my philosophy.
Reader math. I love it.
Exactly. That's my present for reading one book, my prize. So I've always been, somebody who's very into literature and books and reading, and I have several friends who are writers, and at one point, probably now going back about 8 years ago or so, a friend of mine who's also a doctor who has written a couple of novels. I went to her and I, kind of looked online how to do a book proposal, and I wrote up my ideas, and they've certainly changed a lot over the 8 years that I was writing the book.
Mhm.
But I guess my best advice for people who have an idea and want to write a book like that is a good friend of mine, Robin McLean, who's also a novelist and writer, says writing is a team sport. And so the first thing I think you need to do if you want to write a book is get yourself a good team. And I was very lucky to have friends that connected me to other people. And I really have an all-star team of folks. And as I started doing that, I started developing the ideas. I got a couple of really important writing residencies at a place called Hedgebrook, which is for women writers at Whidbey Island, and Mesa Refuge, which is in Marin County. And those were really transformative for the book as well. And so it just kind of snowballed. You get into this community of writers, and it's really supportive. And it was a really wonderful experience for me to develop the ideas in community with other people, which, is along the themes of the book.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear so often that how important that community is, and it actually kind of goes with the whole idea of the book. Not so microcosm of your writing community, but the bigger idea of community in general.
Yeah.
If the reward for reading one book is to buy 4 new books, what is the reward for writing a book?
Well, the reward for writing the book so far for me has been touring the book. Now, not everybody, needs to tour their book or tours their book, but and certainly my publishers are small, and they don't pay for, even big publishers don't really pay for book tours unless you're really famous already.
Right.
So I had to organize that on my own. But I think it was really important for me to bring the book to people in person. And I have been all over. I've been to DC and Boston. I did a little tour of Ohio, my hometowns, to Cleveland and Columbus and Toledo and Detroit and Seattle, where I lived for a while, and Portland. And now I'm kind of doing the Southwest right now. I launched, obviously, did Santa Fe and Albuquerque, but all over. I've been to bookstores, I've been to libraries, I've been to all kinds of lovely spaces with just wonderful community. And that's also been really amazing to see
Mhm.
how the book affects people, to see that in person. And people have been really profoundly affected by the book, which I just is very humbling to me.
Yeah.
And, it does make me want to write another book. So I don't know if that'll take me another 10 years or not. So I'm going to be 60 this year. So, yeah, but we'll see what happens with that. I'm still going to a lot of places coming up. I'm going to Denver, and some other places, like I said, around the Southwest mostly. I'll be at the Tucson Book Fest
Mhm.
later in March. And so yeah, and so anyone who would like me to come, I'm open to doing that.
Yeah.
And you can find information on my website.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. You mentioned earlier that residency was about 30 years for you now. So how soon into your career did you start feeling like this disconnect or this lack of the whole picture? Was it relatively soon or did it develop over time?
Well, it's interesting because I started out working in politics. I didn't go to medical school right out of undergrad. Like I said, I was an English and political science major, and then I worked in the Ohio State Legislature. And
Hmm.
I sort of got a little disillusioned with that because I felt like, especially the staff, even more than the elected officials, were kind of there for the game of politics,
Hmm.
much more than for social justice reasons. Or, I mean, they certainly had those motivations, but what really, float their boat was playing the game of politics. And the game of politics was sort of, I mean, it was interesting to me, but I felt a little disillusioned. And I think all of us are feeling that disillusionment in a big way right now. So it's only gotten worse over the last 30 years, certainly. And I felt like if I really wanted to do politics in the way I was wanting to do it, to advance causes in a much more ethical and better way, I had to understand people's lives. I had to be in a position where I could hear the stories of what real people were going through. And I actually had started out undergrad pre-med, so I decided to go back and do the classes I had to do to get into med school. And that was a great decision. I went to med school to do politics better, which is a weird reason, I admit, but I'll give you that. But it's really it. So I kind of sought out mentors and people who had similar motivations. So I was really lucky pretty early in my career, right after residency, to befriend Paul Farmer, who was the founder of an organization called Partners in Health, which is based in Boston, and just a great humanitarian. Partners in Health was instrumental in making sure that we could get HIV medications promulgated across Africa and share those with the world. And I worked for a while in Mozambique for a different organization, but one that had a very similar philosophy to Partners in Health, sort of a philosophy of decolonizing global health before we had those words even, and or we called it that. And so in the United States, another mentor was Jack Geiger, who founded really the community health system that we have in the United States. And it's very different from what Jack's vision was, but Jack's vision was to create community health centers that would be out in the community, that would be involved with things like, improving the living conditions for people in the community and dealing with food programs and exercise programs in the community and all of that. And, that's been more difficult, but those community health centers, there's like 1,300 of those community health centers across the country now. And so I was very lucky that I knew people like that early in my career. Again, team sport, I think my whole life has been a team sport. So, gathering those folks, and I went to public health school. So I was seeking this kind of like, okay, maybe medicine is not where it's at. Maybe it's public health. And looking at what all these amazing people had tried to do to change the system to address these other issues. And but even when even public health, I found, was also very focused on the individual. And it's just very difficult. I mean, honestly, I think it's difficult in our capitalist system where everything has to be commodified and have a profit to figure out how to carve a space for these things. I mean, I really believe that healthcare education should be accessible to everyone, but that's not how our healthcare system works, unfortunately.
Yeah. No system, of course, is perfect. If you talk to people in a lot of different places, there will be things that they like about their healthcare system, things that they don't like about their healthcare systems, but there are things that are challenges within all of those systems, and that's part of what Wendy is examining with this. And so how do capitalism and the commodification of healthcare and those systems affect us as the people who are trying to maintain health within those systems? We're going to go ahead and take our second break of this episode. When we come back, we'll be talking about the fact that all of this can feel very overwhelming. And Wendy has some stepping stones as places to start to help battle that feeling of being overwhelmed. You are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with Wendy Johnson. We are talking about her book, Kinship Medicine. Before the break, she was talking about the current healthcare system as it stands, at least in the United States, which is where she practices, and some of the challenges within that system. Let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Wendy. There's so many moving pieces because there's the healthcare side of things, but then there's all of the factors that you mentioned earlier, from socioeconomic status to the family system that you grow up. I mean, there's so many moving pieces that I could imagine it would feel very overwhelming to a lot of people to even start to figure it out. At the end of the book, you talk about stepping stones. So can you talk a little bit more about how to make it feel less overwhelming and the specific things that people themselves can do?
Yeah. Well, right. I think one of the first things, Gil Scott-Heron says, the revolution, the song, "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised." Mm-hmm. Your readers know that, your listeners know that song. But he was interviewed about that song. What does that mean, the revolution will not be televised? And he said, well, the first revolution really has to happen in your head, so you can't televise it. It needs to be a change of consciousness. And I think that's true for us too, about healthcare and about health and wellness. If we had a more communal view of our health and wellness, we wouldn't have this $3 trillion wellness industry, most of which is not evidence-based and is really expensive, snake oil. So and people are wasting a lot of money on it. So I think but they're hungry and they're searching for something, and here's somebody that's offering the miracle cure, so they're vulnerable to that, and I get that. So the things that really, so the first thing, I think, like I said, a mindset change, to start thinking of your health and wellness and your body even as a community, to start thinking of yourself as embedded in an ecosystem, and to begin to have the realization that you cannot be healthy as an individual when our communities and our ecosystems are so sick and suffering.
Mm.
So, and that's actually a very hard thing to do in our current culture, where we're so bombarded every day with these ideas of individualism and these ideas, even the kind of self-help genre. I mean, I call my book a collective health book rather than a self-help book,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
even the self-help genre says, okay, you can be a better person if you just do these 10 things,
yeah,
and none of the 10 things have to do with your relationships.
yeah.
So, I just don't think that's gonna cut it for most people. So the first thing is really that mindset change, practicing that mindset change, practicing awareness of that, practicing awareness of your relationships with other humans and with the natural world. And that comes to the second kind of mindset change that I think also has to happen, which we think of ourselves as humans as the top of the pyramid. We're in domination,
Yeah.
and that has led to a lot of death and destruction in the world. And so I think that's the other mindset change, from a human-centric view of the world to a life-centric view of the world, because really we depend on all other living things.
Mm-hmm.
So if we see ourselves as just one node in a mesh of other life forms and beings that can also be seen as our family and our kin, well, you fight for what you love. You fight for your family. So if you see yourself as in kinship with other living things, then you're going to really view what's important in your priorities in the world in a whole different way.
Yeah.
And the lovely thing is, all of this is free. You don't need to buy a program, you don't need to buy a diet, you don't need to buy anything. All of this is free. And it really makes you look in the world in a different way. I sort of end once you can really look in the world with those new eyes, I think you see all kinds of ways to act. And I sort of end with this quote by Clarissa Pinkola Estes, which I'm not going to get exactly right, but basically she says, we just need to look at our local environment, look at what's right next to us, and do what we can, one soul reaching out to another, to alleviate suffering. And there's so much suffering in the world, especially right now. And we don't know which of those acts is gonna be the tipping point.
Yeah.
What we need is an accumulation of acts and a group of people that aren't going to give up after the first or second or 100th gale. So, we look at what's going on in Minnesota. I get a lot of inspiration from that. These are very dark times, very tough times, but we don't know which of our acts is going to be kind of the thing that pushes the whole thing over.
Right.
It's all of us working together, and it doesn't seem like maybe your small local work has effects, but I strongly believe that all of those are have a lot of ripple effects, and that they ripple out and really can move mountains.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that's really kind of big picture, and looking at it from that perspective, from a smaller perspective. And since you are in healthcare, when you see patients, is there anything that you wish they would ask that maybe might help start changing that mindset a little bit? Or I don't.
I think if I write another book, it will be about that, about how frustrating it is to be in the healthcare system where it's not like I'm expecting patients to do something different or ask something different. It's that the whole relationship between doctors and patients is so fraught right now, because I got into medicine. Some of my role models when I got into medicine was a person I knew in Ohio who had graduated medical school in the 1930s and had been a country doc in central Ohio and had delivered babies and done house calls and knew whole families and that model, and didn't have 10 or 15 minutes. And he knew that community for his whole life. He practiced in the same community his whole life. And those people, he knew generations of them. And that kind of knowledge of people is so important to healthcare. And we just I don't have time to sit down and really deeply get to know my patients.
Yeah.
And if I did, I could be a better doctor for them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like we're all in this crazy system that expects us to produce, not even health. What we're kind of checking off boxes as doctors. Did I do the mammogram? Did I do this? Did I order this test? But we're losing the forest for the trees, I think, a lot. And we really don't have time for those less tangible, but maybe more important factors that can really lead to a healing relationship and foster health and wellness in our patients better. Mm-hmm. So that if I write another book, maybe it'll be about that, about the importance of relationship and health and what we can do in our medical system. The other thing I would say is, you alluded to this, things are so complicated. There's a lot of great technology in the Western medical system. So I'm not really dissing the scientific method or the technologies that we have. The medicines and technologies that we have are really powerful, but the way they're delivered is really problematic. And doctors can't do it all. So, we have RFK Jr. saying, well, doctors need to learn nutrition. Well, a better solution to that, there's people called nutritionists and dietitians who that's their whole thing. That's all, they know everything about that. So why should one person have to know everything? Why don't we have a team of people? Why can't we fund that? Why can't our healthcare system pay for you?
Can't they communicate? Because even sometimes you have a team, they're not connected.
Yeah. All working in the same place, all talking together about your health, even seeing you at the same time, maybe. So why can't we have that? So I think that's another thing that our healthcare system doesn't do. It's very fragmented, as you said, and a lot of services that are important aren't paid for. So we need to look at that too.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm just imagining how amazing that could be if you had that whole team of doctors that are working together, that actually talk to each other, that you don't have to go to each doctor and try to explain what the last doctor said or get your records. If it was all much more easily accessible. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, depending on your situation, but just think of how that might streamline the process. I think it would be pretty amazing. We're going to go ahead and take our next break of this episode. When we come back, we'll be talking about what Wendy hopes that you, as the reader of this book, might take away from the book as a whole. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with Wendy Johnson. Before the break, she was talking about the system and its, again, challenges and ways that it could be more streamlined or ways that might make it a little easier to navigate, but ways that it could function better as a whole for us as patients. Let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Wendy.
I'm sure there's a lot of things, but is there one thing overall that you really hope readers will take away from the book?
Well, I think it's just looking at the world with new eyes. I really think I really think this human-centric way of looking at the world is the root of a lot of evil. I mean, I think you can relate that to ideas of racism and sexism and white supremacy and all of it that we're seeing, really right now and cause a lot of harm in the world. And so I think if people could understand how that's so ingrained in, everything that we get fed on social media, on, in the news, in our educational system, that it's really hard to retrain your mind to look at the world in a different way, right? It's really difficult. And so I think it takes time. So I guess inspiring people to try to go on that journey and try to like almost deprogram ourselves from the current rush of information we get. I'm not into tuning out because I think we need to be aware of what's going on in the world so we have the tools to change it. But I think that we feel helpless because we can't see that, it's a lot of dots to connect between what I can do in my local area and maybe changing the world. And if we can kind of see our path to a better way of doing things, I think that helps connect those dots. And so I guess that's what I hope people take out of it. Some people have read the book and said, oh, I thought it would be more hopeful, and it's not very hopeful. And I'm like, well, and some people have had the opposite reaction, which I think means I kind of got the sweet spot. But of course, it's not pie in the sky. This is not a panacea for anything. I think we're going to go some really dark times for a long time. But I think that if we can create those little centers of resilience of people looking at the world in a different way and really acting out of that and experimenting with different ways to live, I think those centers of resilience are going to be where rebirth is going to happen from at some point. I may not live to see it, but that's okay.
Yeah. You mentioned that rush of information, and it's great that we have access to so much information in this day and age, but how do we take that flood of information and filter it down so it's not just washing everything away in its path? It's a little more manageable.
Right. And I don't know that I have the answer to that, but I think that balance is one thing. I strongly believe that we shouldn't ignore what's going on in the world, right? But maybe figuring out for you who are a few trusted sources and just looking at that, and not concerning yourself with trying to read everything. And balancing that, I really do think we need time to digest all of that, and time away from all the fray, and time again alone with nature, time to be mindful, rest time and downtime. We have so little of that in our world right now.
I agree. So you may or may not write another book depending on a million different factors. Are you working on any smaller projects right now though in terms of writing?
I'm always kind of writing essays and things like that. I'm actually writing something totally also sort of unrelated, because turning 60 right now, I've never been married and I don't have any kids. And that's an unusual thing for a 60-year-old woman in America. And so I'm just kind of reflecting on that in a way that is not, I don't have regrets or sadness about that. And I've had a very interesting life, and I have a huge amount of community and family, and I have a huge number of kids in my life too. So I often see this thing about having kids as, we have the child-free people who are kind of adamant about not having children and the relation to climate change and all of that. And then, of course, now we have this pro-natalist movement that's pushing everybody to have as many kids as possible. So it's an interesting time to kind of reflect back on my life, which has been filled with kids, really, but not my own biological kids. And so I don't really see that view reflected very much. So I'm working on an essay on that. I have 4 jobs also. I still see patients, and I work in a community clinic in northern New Mexico. I do clinical investigations for a research firm. I consult with a community clinic in Southern Ohio, helping them improve their addiction medicine services, and then the book. So I'm pretty busy. Carving out time for writing is hard. So
yes, you have at least one dog, or there's a ghost.
Yeah, I've got a couple, 3 dogs around me right now. So also,
I just see occasionally a little bit of movement, and I think,
some tail. Yeah, they haven't eaten yet, so they're anxious to get fed.
So they're probably like, Mom, hey, hello.
Yeah. Did you forget about us? Here we are. Yeah.
We are way more important than whatever you have going on right now.
Exactly. Yeah. Here. I don't know if you can see. No, you can't see Luca. Here, I'll put the camera down so you can see.
Fluffy. We already talked about the fact that you like to read a lot. So when you're reading just for your own fun, your own pleasure, favorite authors and genres?
I read a lot of nonfiction, and I read a lot of kind of environmental kind of books. Most recently, some things that I've been reading that I really love a lot is Robert McFarland, Is a River Alive? The book has been compared, of course, to Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. A lot of the ideas in the book and a lot of the ideas that I'm talking about today are really rooted in Indigenous philosophy and Indigenous science and technology. And we don't call it that. We don't call it science and technology. That's another kind of, racist thing that we do. And for white people, it's called science and technology. For Indigenous people, it's called tradition or whatever. But they do have their own science, technology, philosophy, and a lot of these ideas come from Indigenous science and philosophy. I'm listening right now. I do a lot of audiobooks. I'm talking in Taos. My conversation partner is Mirabai Starr. She writes a lot about feminine mysticism and spirituality, and I really like her. I'm reading right now Julian Brave Noise Cats. It's a memoir, but it's also kind of a survey of Indigenous history and rights in Canada and the United States. A lot focused in Canada. His people come from are in Canada, but so the Salish people. Really enjoying that. So a broad range of things, really. The bibliography for the book is really big.
Quite extensive. Yes. I read digital copies, and I was like 90%, and then it said 90%, and then I was in your epilogue, and so then I started flipping through, and I'm like, oh, that's the rest of the
Yeah, exactly. But there's a lot in the epilogue.
But I mean, the bibliography, if people want more, there's plenty of sources for them to do more.
So as with most authors I talk to, now my TBR is longer. But not only are there the books that she talked about reading and why she has read them and enjoyed reading them, as I mentioned, the bibliography at the end of this book is extensive. And if you are looking for more sources, or if you want to add more books to your TBR, look no further than this bibliography because it is extensive. It is full of lots of information to various levels, I'm sure, of books that may suit your interests and ways that you like to read, but there are options there if you want them. We are going to go ahead and take our final break of this episode. When we come back, we'll be touching on just some of the research, some more of the research that Wendy did in the writing of this book. You are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my interview with author Wendy Johnson. Before the break, she was talking about what she likes to read, what she has been reading. We touched on the bibliography for this book, but let's go ahead and return to that conversation with Wendy.
Actually, your answer reminded me that I wanted to ask you, as you were doing more research to write the book, was there anything surprising in that research or anything that stood out even more than other research?
I mean, I think really I started out with these ideas not understanding how well they're supported by evidence. And there continues to be more evidence to support them. For example, Parkinson's disease. More and more evidence is coming forward to say, we used to think, oh, well, some people might just be genetically predisposed to that. And it's true that people are, that is true, but it's now we know that maybe only 5 or 10% of people who get Parkinson's get it because of their genetic predisposition, and probably something like 90% or more get it because of environmental exposure.
Wow.
That has given them, that has predisposed them to Parkinson's. And a lot of this might be environment working with genes too. So there's another new study that came out about bacterial vaginosis in women, which we just used to treat the woman and not think about treating the partner. And really bacterial vaginosis itself is another form of what I said before, dysbiosis, that word that means a disordered microbiome in the vagina. And now we understand that the sexual contact and the whole, I mean, of course, that environment includes your partner, right? So, which we ignored for all this time. So our treatments for bacterial vaginosis, they worked for some people, but for some people, they just kept coming back and the treatments didn't work, and it was really frustrating for a lot of women. And now there was a recent study that just showed, oh, well, if you treat the partner, it goes away, because it's almost like a sexually transmitted disease. But it's really like it's more helpful to think about it as again a disordered microbiome. And so I think that we are just beginning to scratch the surface of looking at things in this ecological perspective, and we're finding many. In the book, I use the example of Clostridium difficile, and that's a really bad disease that can even kill people. and very hard to cure. And it's a dysbiosis really of the gut. This bad bacteria kind of overgrows the gut if you're use antibiotics and cut out the bacteria that are helping to create the balance that you need in your gut. So it's kind of like in a garden when you've got an invasive species. I struggle with bindweed in my house, and that's what I talk about in the book. And you've got a landscape that's been damaged, and then the invasive species takes hold, and it's the same idea. So if we thought about things in that ecological way, I think we'd find that a lot more diseases have this ecological perspective, this environmental aspect, and then we'd be able to really devise better treatments for them.
Yeah. Just like you said, that mindset shift,
right?
Just a little bit.
So the interesting thing to me is I thought this was my crazy harebrained idea. I mean, everyone's talking about the microbiome, I know, but to apply that to kind of other things. But I found, there's really, really a lot of really good evidence for it, and more evidence coming out all the time.
Good. Thank you. If people want to know more about the book, website, I know you have a website, and any social media that you're active on.
Yeah, I try to be a little bit active on a lot of social
all
media.
Of your spare time.
Yeah, but I'm definitely on Facebook and Instagram. On Instagram, I mean, you could Google my name or put my name in and it should come up, but Artivism with a Z, IZM, is my tag on Instagram, and just my name on Facebook, Dr. Wendy Johnson, should come up. And I'm actually also on Blue Sky and Substack and TikTok as well. Less on some of those things. And my website is wendyjohnsonmd.com. So easy. So you can get links to all that on there too. And you can email me through my website if there's, an event you want me to come do or something like that as well.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wendy, is there anything that we haven't covered that you wanted to make sure you brought up or highlighted during this time?
No, I think it's been a great talk. So thanks very much, Sarah. I just want to encourage people to try not to get discouraged. And I think the easiest way for that is don't feel isolated. Reach out to other people and other living beings. And I get a lot of solace from the natural world. And even if you're in an urban environment, you can find places that you can, be with nature. So I just encourage people to build those relationships and grow those relationships and see the whole world as family. And it really helps in these dark times.
Yeah.
To do that.
Well, thank you. And thank you for taking the time out of your day to talk to me about the book and writing and just all the bigger concepts that are in the book. I really appreciate it.
Sure. It's been a pleasure to be here. Thanks very much, Sarah.
Thank you so much to Wendy for joining me to talk about kinship medicine, to talk about her experiences as a family practitioner, about her experiences with thinking very deeply about these subjects. If this is something that you have thought about and would like to learn more about, if you just want to maybe learn a different way of thinking about your own health and your own body and how it relates to the world around you and how those interact as ecosystems, working within ecosystems, then definitely check this book out. You have heard all of Wendy's, everything that Wendy has talked about and everything that she has thought about and incorporated into the book. And so if that is something that interests you, of course, by all means, you should definitely check out this book because there is a lot of really good information. There's a lot of really thought-provoking information. There's things that actually I am still kind of thinking through. They're rolling around in my brain. How do I incorporate this? What questions can I ask? How can I think differently about my own health and the health of not only physical health, but my mental health and the health of my family and how my environment, in fact, impacts that, how I impact my environment, all of those things. So if this is something that interests you, please check this out. And thank you, of course, for joining me for this conversation. I hope that you will join me for the next conversation, of course, when I will be speaking with author Amy Rossi about her novel, The Cover Girl. This is Amy's debut novel. It starts in 2018. We meet Birdie, Elizabeth, depending on which timeline you're in, what name she goes by, a 50-something model, and she's received an invitation that makes her start thinking about how she got to this point in her life. So she was a model discovered at 13 in the early 70s, and I don't want to give too much away. I want you to tune into the conversation, but she had a very interesting life that led her to this point, and she's now trying to confront a lot of those things from her past because she's received this invitation, and is it an invitation she wants to accept? So I really enjoyed the conversation with Amy. I hope that you will join me for that conversation as we talk about The Cover Girl. In the meantime, I hope you're having a wonderful week. I don't know, is it still snowpocalypse on the East Coast? I'm not even sure. Whatever your weather, I hope it's okay. I hope you're safe, and I hope that you're doing well. You know what I'm going to say next, because I always say it. If you're a fan of the podcast, please like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you're either listening to or watching this episode on. Helps the algorithm. Something else that helps the algorithm is to leave a positive review. It really does help, I promise. And you can follow the podcast on social media: Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky. Love hearing from you. Find the podcast, ask me questions, tell me what you're reading, all of those good things. Thank you again for joining me. I hope you're having a really wonderful week, but most of all, I hope that week is giving you as much time as possible to get yourself lost in a good book. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.